Innovations too advanced for their time. Explained by Dr. Morpheus. This is Innovations too advanced for their time. We like to tell ourselves a comforting story about history. We imagine a straight line, stone to bronze, bronze to iron, simple tools to complex machines. We picture our ancestors as primitive, fumbling in the dark, slowly, methodically building their way up to us, as if we are the inevitable endpoint of a steady climb. But that story is wrong. History isn't a staircase. It isn't neat. It isn't fair. It is a chaos of breakthroughs and burnings, of geniuses whose work survived, and geniuses whose work vanished without leaving even a footnote behind. Sometimes humanity takes a leap centuries ahead of where it should be, then stands still for generations, as if stunned by its own audacity. In that chaos, there is a particular type of creator worth paying attention to, the visionary. Visionaries do not build what their time needs. They build what no one is ready for. Their inventions feel misplaced, like artifacts that fell backward through time. You look at them and think, this shouldn't exist yet. Not here. Not now. Not with the tools and knowledge they had. Most of the time, their work is swallowed by war, poverty, politics, or simple neglect. But every now and then, one of these impossible creations resurfaces. A weapon described in terrified chronicles, a machine dredged out of the sea, a blade whose very metal carries secrets that its makers could only feel, never name. Tonight we're going to open 3 such case files. One is a weapon of liquid fire so ferocious that it helped save an empire. It burned on water, clung to ships and men, and shattered the morale of entire fleets. Its formula was guarded so jealously that it was eventually lost forever. The second is a device made not of flame, but of bronze and thought. A compact machine, dense with gears that could model the movements of the heavens and predict eclipses. It lay unnoticed in the hold of a sunken ship for nearly 2,000 years, until modern scientists realized what they were holding in their hands. The third is something more intimate, a sword forged from steel that should not have existed in its time, hard yet flexible, beautiful yet deadly. Its surface holding patterns that reveal a hidden architecture of matter. All 3 are real. All 3 are documented. All 3 were far beyond what we would expect from their eras. And all 3 raise the same unsettling questions. How were they possible? What knowledge did their creators have that others did not? And what does it say about us that such brilliance can be forgotten? Let's open the first file. Greek fire, the empire's burning secret. We begin in the 7th century after Christ, in the eastern half of what we like to call the fallen Roman Empire. In reality, Rome has not fallen at all. It has simply moved its capital east to a city called Constantinople. A city of colossal walls, glittering churches, bustling markets, and enormous strategic importance. The empire that calls itself Roman and that we call Byzantine is in deep trouble. For decades, it has been locked in a catastrophic series of wars against the Sassanid Persians. Whole provinces have been devastated, armies destroyed, taxes raised, cities sacked. The empire survives, but it survives exhausted. And then, just as that long war ends, something new appears on the map. The early Islamic Caliphate. The Arab armies move with shocking speed. Syria falls. Egypt, the breadbasket of the Eastern Empire, is lost. North Africa begins to slip away. To the Byzantines watching this unfold, it must feel like the ground is disappearing under their feet. The new power does not stop with the provinces. It sets its sights on the heart. Constantinople itself. From the south and east come armies over land. From the sea comes something even more terrifying to a coastal empire, a massive fleet. Naval warfare in this era is a brutal, intimate affair. There are no cannons, no torpedoes. Ships are powered by oars and wind. Battles are resolved by ramming and boarding. One ship slams into another, grappling hooks are thrown, and suddenly your deck is a melee of swords, axes, spears, and arrows. Victory usually goes to whoever can bring the most ships and the most men. By that logic, Constantinople should fall. It doesn't. As the Arab fleet moves into position in the Sea of Marmara, a small number of Byzantine warships, sleek vessels called dromons, row out to meet them. From a distance, they do not look especially threatening. They are fast, agile, lightly built. On their prows, however, they carry something unusual. Stout, metal-clad tubes, jutting forward like the snouts of strange beasts. The Arab crews have never seen these before. They may not even have noticed them at first. Then the dromons close in. There is a shout. Men operate pumps and bellows. And suddenly, from the mouths of those tubes, a stream of liquid flame erupts. Imagine being on one of those ships, seeing it for the first time. You're expecting arrows, maybe a volley of javelins. Instead, you watch a rope of fire leap through the air and smash into the hull of the vessel beside you. Not a simple burning arrow, not a pot of oil, a continuous jet. The material sticks, it spreads. It doesn't just burn where it lands. It crawls along wood and rope, splashes across the deck, climbs up rigging, catches on clothing and hair. Men scream and flail and throw themselves overboard. And that's when they make a second discovery. The sea itself is on fire. The substance floats. It burns on the surface of the water. Some accounts claim that when panicked sailors try to douse it, water makes things worse, not better. Whether that part is literally true or not, the effect on human minds is the same. This is not normal fire. This is something else. The enemy fleet breaks. Ships smash into each other. Oars tangle. Some captains order retreats. Others try to push through the chaos and close the distance, only to be met with more gouts of flame. What should have been a straightforward naval strangulation of Constantinople becomes a nightmare, and the siege fails. This is not a one-time miracle. Greek fire appears again in the defense of the city during the Second Great Arab Siege in the years 717 and 718. That siege is broken by a combination of factors: harsh winter, famine, disease, logistical overreach. But again, Greek fire plays a crucial role in destroying the attacking fleet and protecting the sea walls. Later still, in the 10th century, the Rus, Norse-descended raiders and traders from the north, sailed their fleets down into Byzantine waters. One chronicler records an episode in 941 when a small Byzantine squadron armed with Greek fire unleashes such devastation on a much larger Russ's force that the enemy ships are burned, scattered, and shattered, their crews cut down as they scramble onto shore. We see a clear pattern. Whenever this weapon appears, the psychological and tactical effect is enormous. So what exactly is it? The sources describe it in different ways. Liquid fire, sea fire, manufactured fire. They almost all agree on certain characteristics. It ignites easily, it burns fiercely, it clings to surfaces. It can burn on or even in water. It can be projected from tubes using some kind of pump or siphon. It can also be stored in containers, as in the case of small pots or grenades hurled by catapults or thrown by hand. We can make educated guesses about its composition. The Eastern Mediterranean region has access to natural petroleum and related products like naphtha, sticky, volatile fluids that burn readily and float on water. If you start with that kind of base and you add things like pine resin, sulfur, pitch, maybe quicklime, you can create a thick, sticky, horrifyingly effective incendiary compound. Modern experiments have recreated substances that resemble the descriptions, mixtures that cling, that burn hot, that float, that are very difficult to extinguish. But no one has managed to reproduce every described behavior exactly, especially the often mentioned interaction with water. That may be because we're missing something chemical, or it may be because we're missing something practical. How it was prepared, at what temperatures, how it was stored, how it was pressurized, what the sprayers looked like, how the crews were trained to use it under stress. Greek fire is more than a formula. It's a whole technology system, fuel chemistry, container manufacture, pump engineering, tactical deployment, crew training, and almost certainly a strict security protocol around all of it. That security protocol is part of why we know so little. The Byzantines considered Greek fire a state secret of the highest order. The 10th century Emperor Constantine VII does not describe the recipe, but he does describe the seriousness with which it must be guarded. He warns against revealing it to foreigners. He wraps its origin in a legend of divine revelation, claiming it was granted to the first Christian emperor by an angel. You don't surround a trivial weapon with that kind of mythology. You do that for something you consider existential. Greek fire is, in a sense, a 7th century superweapon. From an engineering standpoint, its existence is startling. Think about what is required to make a ship-mounted flamethrower practical in that era. You need people who understand how to distill and handle flammable liquids without accidentally blowing themselves up. You need metal workers who can build pressurized siphons and pumps that don't fail catastrophically in battle. You need a supply chain. Somewhere, someone has to gather raw materials, distill them, refine them, store them, and move them to the right ships at the right time. You need doctrine. When do you fire? At what range? In what weather conditions? Against what kinds of vessels? This sounds less like a medieval army and more like a modern military-industrial project. It is very tempting, from the safe distance of the present, to underestimate the scientific and technical sophistication of the past. Greek fire forces us to admit they might have been more advanced, at least in certain niches, than our simple timelines suggest. What eventually happens to this weapon? For centuries, it remains a uniquely Byzantine capability. Other cultures use fire in war, of course. They experiment with their own incendiary mixtures. They learn to fear fire aboard wooden ships, to use it when besieging fortifications. But nothing quite matches the combination of formula and delivery system that Greek fire represents. The Byzantines succeed too well in guarding their secret. They guard it so tightly that when their empire begins to crumble through internal conflict, economic fragmentation, and foreign invasion, the knowledge has nowhere safe to live. People die, workshops are looted, archives are burned. By the time Western Crusaders sack Constantinople in 1204, there is little clear evidence that Greek fire is still actively deployed. By the final Ottoman conquest of the city in 1453, it appears to have vanished completely. Something that once terrified whole fleets, that shifted the balance of power in the Mediterranean simply disappears. There is something tragic about that. There is also something revealing. We sometimes imagine that if a powerful technology exists, it will naturally expand, evolve, and survive. Greek fire shows us that this is not guaranteed. A technology can be too tightly held. It can be too closely associated with one institution, one state, one priesthood, one guild. If that structure collapses, knowledge can collapse with it. Greek fire is like a star that burned very hot and very bright for a few centuries, then winked out. It didn't lead to a sustained discipline of combustion, science. It did not seed an era of experimentation in chemical engineering. Its influence is felt in the chronicles of fear, not in a long line of incremental innovations. It is, in other words, a classic example of a dead branch in the tree of technology, a branch that grew faster and stronger than the rest for a time, then withered and broke away. It proves that humans were capable of this level of applied science, and also that we're capable of losing it. Now that we've followed the trail of fire, I want to turn to something very different. The first case file is about destruction, fear, secrecy, and a weapon that bought an empire time. The second is about curiosity, measurement, prediction, and a device that compresses the cosmos into a handful of bronze wheels. Greek fire asks, how did they do this? The next device asks a different question. How did they do this and then forget how? If you've stayed with me this far, if you are still listening to stories about chemistry in the 600s and flaming ships in the dark, then you are part of a small group of people who are willing to go deeper than the usual surface-level history. You're not just watching for entertainment. You're investigating. So, if you want more of these journeys into the strange edges of our past, more case files, more dead branches on the tree of technology, commit to it. Make sure you're subscribed. Leave a like, not for my sake, but to teach the machines that you prefer forgotten genius over forgettable noise. And share this with someone who thinks the past was simple. They might need a little Greek fire in their worldview. Let's open case file 2, the Antikythera Mechanism, a clockwork cosmos. Our second story begins in the year 1900, off a rocky little island between Crete and mainland Greece. A storm is blowing. A group of sponge divers has taken shelter and decided to make the best of their time, diving in the clear waters when the weather briefly allows. One of them, a man named Elias Stadiatis, descends. The water is cold, the light fades with depth. As he nears the bottom, he sees something that shocks him. Figures, human shapes, lying twisted on the seabed. Horses, limbs, faces. He shoots back to the surface, terrified, and babbles about corpses. His captain thinks he is suffering from nitrogen narcosis, divers' hallucinations. So the captain goes down himself. What he sees are not bodies. They are statues, bronze and marble figures scattered across the sea floor, lying in strange poses, half buried in sand and growth. They have discovered a wreck. Over time, with help from the Greek government, the divers and archaeologists bring up a treasure trove. Works of art, luxury goods, everyday items. The ship, likely a large trading vessel from the 1st century before Christ, seems to have been carrying high-end cargo, perhaps from the eastern Mediterranean to wealthy patrons in Italy. Among the more glamorous finds, a heroic, bronze, a philosopher's head, fine glass. There is something much less impressive at first glance. A small, heavily corroded mass of bronze and wood, roughly the size of a thick book. It is tagged, catalogued, stored. For a while it sits. Then, in 1902, a piece of that corroded lump breaks away. Someone looks closely. Inside they see a gear. Not a decorative motif, not a random shape, but a clearly defined, toothed wheel, precisely cut. More careful inspection reveals additional gears, stacked and meshed, and faint, almost invisible Greek inscriptions on parts of the device. This is a machine. The problem is, according to the standard story of technological history at the time, this machine does not make sense. We know from medieval European cathedrals and towers that large mechanical clocks with intricate gear trains appear around the 1300s. We know from the development of watchmaking that precision miniature gears appear even later. To find something like that 1500 years earlier, crammed into a handheld box in a shipwreck from the 1st century BC, is like finding a 19th century pocket watch inside a Viking burial. It doesn't fit. So for decades, the mechanism lives in a twilight zone of scholarship. It's clearly interesting. It is clearly complex. Various people propose that it might be some kind of astronomical device, some kind of calendar or navigational tool. But the corrosion makes it incredibly difficult to study without destroying it. Later, in the mid-20th century, X-ray imaging allows scholars to peer inside without breaking the device apart. A historian of science named Derek de Solla Price painstakingly analyzes the internal shapes, counts gear teeth, and begins to reconstruct how it might have worked. He concludes that it is an analog computer, a machine that, when you turn a crank, computes the positions of celestial bodies and displays them as moving indicators on dials. This is a bold claim for the time. It pushes back the timeline of complex geared mechanisms. But the real transformation comes at the turn of the 21st century, when modern imaging techniques, high-resolution X-ray tomography and surface scanning, reveal the mechanism in extraordinary detail. Now we can see the fine inscriptions etched into the metal. We can trace the gear trains in 3 dimensions. We can read tiny labels that function as instructions and legends. The picture that emerges is astonishing. Imagine holding in your hands a box about the size of a thick laptop. On the front is a circular dial with markings for the days of the year and the signs of the zodiac. 2 pointers rotate over this face, one representing the sun, one the moon. There is also a small sphere, half dark and half light, that turns to show the current phase of the moon. On the back are 2 more dials, each arranged in a spiral. The upper one marks a cycle of 19 years, broken into 235 lunar months. The Metonic cycle, used by Greek astronomers and calendar makers to coordinate lunar and solar time. Nested within that is a smaller dial noting the cycle of major athletic games, including the Olympics. The lower spiral marks a longer 223-month pattern, the Saros cycle, which predicts the recurrence of eclipses. Along this spiral are tiny symbols noting when eclipses will occur, and accompanying text describing details about these eclipses. You turn the main crank, probably on the side of the box, and all of these indicators move, each at its own pace, according to the gearing inside. You can move forward in time, backward in time, jump to a particular year, and see where the sun and moon will be in the sky, what phase the moon will be in, and when eclipses are expected. That alone would be an incredible achievement. Some researchers think the device also tracked the positions of the known planets, using even more elaborate gearing to simulate their strange motions as seen from Earth. If that is correct, then this machine isn't just a calendar. It is a three-dimensional, mechanical model of the Greek geocentric universe. The level of craftsmanship required is difficult to overstate. The gears are small, the teeth are cut with a regularity that suggests advanced templates and tools. Some of the gear trains use clever mechanisms like pin and slot systems to produce non-uniform motion, mimicking the variable speed of the moon's orbit as understood from contemporary astronomical theory. The device integrates observations and models from various traditions, Babylonian eclipse cycles, Greek geometric astronomy, practical calendar needs, and the cultural rhythm of festivals and games. It is not a gadget you would throw together casually. It represents a sophisticated marriage of theory and practice. To build it, you need people who understand cycles, ratios, and the relations between them. You need people who can translate that understanding into a specific set of wheels and teeth. You need artisans who can cut those wheels in bronze to a tight tolerance without modern machine tools. You need someone to bring all of this together in a design that fits inside a portable case and can survive handling. All of that points to a tradition. You do not wake up one day in 100 BC and decide, with no prior examples, to build the Antikythera Mechanism. You build it at the end of a line of smaller projects, prototypes, teaching devices and experiments. That is what makes it so haunting, because we don't see that line. We see a few scattered references in ancient texts to geared astronomical models, armillary spheres and planetariums. Writers mention that Archimedes built mechanisms that could represent the motion of celestial bodies. They describe philosophical devices that show the dance of the heavens in mechanical form. But the physical objects themselves, whatever Archimedes built, whatever his successors built, are gone. The Antikythera Mechanism is, so far, the only one of its kind that we can physically examine. It is like finding a single advanced smartphone in a world you thought only had sundials and abacuses, and realizing that even if this is just one object, it implies the existence of workshops, factories, and entire industries that have vanished without a trace. When historians talk about scientific revolutions, they often focus on written work. They praise treatises, theories, mathematical breakthroughs. This is understandable. Texts survive better than devices. Manuscripts can be copied. Instruments rust, burn, corrode, or are melted down. But the Antikythera Mechanism reminds us that scientific and technological sophistication also lives in hands and shoes and tools. There can be whole schools of practice, of doing, that leave behind almost nothing in the written record. This machine forces us to redraw our mental map of ancient technology. It suggests that the Greek and Hellenistic world did not just theorize about the cosmos in abstract terms. It embodied those theories in metal and wood. And then, somehow, that embodiment stopped. Why? We can give the usual answers: the Roman conquest, the gradual prioritization of other forms of knowledge, the loss of patronage for pure scientific or philosophical work, the eventual crises of the 3rd century, invasions, civil wars, economic decline, and much later, the slow fragmentation of the empire into eastern and western halves. With each disruption, specialized, fragile traditions are at risk. A goldsmith can keep working when the political situation changes. Farmers adapt. Soldiers adapt. But the craft of building a very specific, high-end astronomical computer? That depends on continuity, of teachers, of clients, of demand, of spare parts. When those threads fray, the practice can quietly die. From the perspective of the universe, nothing remarkable has happened. Matter continues to move. Stars continue to burn. From the perspective of our species, however, something enormous has been lost: the ability to do a particular kind of thinking with our hands. It took us more than 1,000 years to reinvent similar devices. When complex clocks appear in Europe in the late Middle Ages, they are seen as marvels, as signs of a newly emerging mechanical culture. By then, the Antikythera Mechanism had already been lying on the seabed for over a millennium. We often speak of the advance of technology as if it were inevitable. But what Greek fire and the Antikythera Mechanism show us is that it is entirely possible for humans to reach a particular edge of knowledge, stand there for a moment, and then step back, forgetting how they got there for centuries. Greek fire shows us that you can have a technology that is tightly bound to power, guarded like a religious relic, and then lost when that power crumbles. The Antikythera Mechanism shows us that you can have a technology that is tied to a fragile culture of artisans and philosophers, and that it can vanish when that culture is disrupted, leaving behind a single, mute survivor. What other things like these have we lost? What other fields of knowledge, in medicine, metallurgy, astronomy, or something we do not even have a name for, briefly bloomed in some forgotten workshop or court, then died out before leaving any trace we can recognize? And perhaps more unsettling, what does that mean for us? We like to imagine that we are different, that we have backups, cloud storage, redundant systems, that in a world of billions of people and petabytes of data, knowledge is finally safe. But think about it. How many critical technologies in our own world depend on extremely narrow chains of expertise? How many strange, brilliant ideas sit in unpublished research, in unfunded proposals, in abandoned prototypes in a lab closet? How many projects depend on a single small company, a single aging engineer, a single server in a basement? How much of what we know is stored in ways that might not be readable or might not be trusted 100 or 1,000 years from now? The Byzantines probably thought Greek fire would be theirs forever. Some Hellenistic workshop probably thought there would always be clients for mechanical models of the heavens. They were wrong. It is entirely possible that some of the things we have built and understood will one day look, to future eyes, like Greek fire and the Antikythera Mechanism look to us now, impossibly advanced for their apparent context, with no obvious path leading up to them and no visible continuation afterward. Let's open the third case file. Damascus Steel, the blade that shouldn't exist. If Greek fire is a story of liquid flame and the Antikythera Mechanism is a story of moving heavens, our third case file is a story of something far more intimate. A single blade in a human hand. Not a machine, not a fortress, not a ship. Just a sword. But a sword that, for centuries, was said to do things no other blade could do. We call it Damascus Steel. The name conjures up images of curved sabers flashing in the desert sun, of warriors in mail and silk, of crusaders whispering nervously about the weapons of their enemies. It also conjures up something very specific, very physical, a surface rippled with dark and light waves, like flowing water or wood grain frozen in steel. These blades were said to be sharper, tougher, and more flexible than the weapons they faced. Stories about them border on legend, that they could slice a silk scarf drifting through the air, that they could cut cleanly through lesser European swords. that they could nick stone without shattering. As usual with legends, there is exaggeration. But there is also a core of truth. To understand why these blades count as too advanced for their time, we have to look not at the battles, but at the material itself. Damascus Steel, as used in these legendary swords, wasn't just ordinary iron hammered into shape. It was produced from a particular kind of high-carbon steel known as woots, made in India and Sri Lanka and traded across the Islamic world. Craftsmen in places like Persia and Syria took these ingots and forged them into blades using techniques that were partly known, partly kept as workshop secrets, and partly passed on through demonstration rather than explanation. At a time when much of the world was still struggling to produce consistent, high-quality iron, these smiths were manipulating steel at a microscopic level without any formal concept of atoms, phases, or microstructures. They learned empirically how to heat, cool, hammer, and fold to create a material with a particular balance of hardness and toughness. Too hard, and a blade holds an edge but shatters easily. Too soft, and it bends or dulls quickly. The Damascus blades hit a sweet spot. Modern metallurgical analysis of surviving swords has revealed complex structures inside the steel. Networks of carbides, compounds of iron and carbon, forming bands and patterns within the metal. In some specimens, researchers have even found nano-scale features, like carbon nanotube-like structures or extremely fine carbide arrays that contribute to the blade's mechanical properties. In other words, these smiths, working with charcoal fires and simple tools, were unwittingly performing nano-engineering. They learned to generate those famous patterns, not just as surface decoration, but as a visible signature of a particular internal structure. The flowing lines you see on a Damascus blade aren't painted on. They are the exposed cross-section of layered and segregated microstructures within the steel. To achieve that, you need more than brute force. You need a deep, intuitive understanding of what happens to metal as it is heated, cooled, and shaped. You need to know how long to hold at a given temperature, when to quench, when to temper, when to strike, when to stop. You need to understand, at the level of experience, how small differences in ore, charcoal, and even local climate affect the final product. And the result, in its time, was unmatched. European crusaders, facing Middle Eastern warriors armed with these blades, were using swords made from lower quality steels, often full of impurities and inconsistencies. To them, Damascus blades felt like something from another world. Their own weapons could bend, warp, or snap. These other blades bit deep, held their edges, and seemed to combine contradictory qualities, flexible enough not to shatter, hard enough to stay razor sharp. We have to be careful not to romanticize too far. Not every blade called Damascus was extraordinary. Not every story is true. But enough evidence remains, in testing, in surviving examples, in period accounts, to say that there was a real, measurable difference between the best Damascus blades and the average swords of their contemporaries. So where did this knowledge come from? The answer lies in a network of trade and craft that stretched across continents. Wootz steel ingots were produced in South Asia using crucible techniques. Iron and charcoal were sealed in small crucibles and heated until the iron absorbed a high percentage of carbon and melted, then cooled slowly. This produced a steel with a relatively uniform composition, but with the potential to form complex internal structures if treated correctly. These ingots traveled along trade routes to the Middle East, where master smiths had learned how to heat and forge them in ways that brought out their best qualities. They may not have understood the role of vanadium, molybdenum, or other trace elements, but they understood from repeated trials that certain ingots behaved better than others, and that certain sequences of heating and hammering produced desirable results. Over time, a craft tradition evolved, patterns of practice, guarded techniques, perhaps even incantations and rituals that wrapped practical knowledge in a cloak of mystique. Once again, we're looking at a technology system, not just an object. Damascus Steel depended on access to specific ores and ingots, control over forging temperature, sometimes judged by the color of the heated metal, careful timing of heating, cooling and hammering cycles, the embodied knowledge of craftsmen who could read the steel with their eyes and hands. And then, like Greek fire, it began to fade. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the production of true Damascus steel, meaning blades made from crucible woods with those characteristic internal structures, declined and then ceased. Several things went wrong at once. Trade routes shifted. Sources of suitable ore and ingots became less accessible or were replaced with different types of steel that looked similar but did not behave the same way during forging. Political upheavals disrupted traditional workshops. Apprenticeship lines were broken. The few people who still knew exactly how to coax the right patterns and properties from the metal grew old. At the same time, industrialization in Europe brought new steels, new processes, new mass production methods. Pattern-welded blades that mimicked the appearance of Damascus began to be made more cheaply, confusing the terminology. The word Damascus started to refer to looks rather than essence. By the time modern metallurgists became interested in the old blades, the original process was gone. We have the objects. We can study them under microscopes, analyze their compositions, even recreate materials that are as good or better using modern tools. But we cannot say with complete certainty that we know exactly what a mastersmith in Damascus or Isfahan did, step by step, as he stood in front of his forge. Like Greek fire, Damascus steel became a dead branch. The knowledge climbed to a peak, nano-structured steel, forged by eye and hand, and then broke off. Modern materials science has grown its own branches, with stainless steels, superalloys, ceramics, and composites. In some ways, we have far surpassed the old blades. But we did not get there by building directly on their work. We circled back, centuries later, from a different direction. And that gap raises the same questions as our other case files. How many times can humanity learn to do something astonishing with matter, then forget? How many times can sophisticated craft traditions disappear because the economic, political, or cultural conditions that sustained them shift slightly out of alignment? If the Antikythera Mechanism is a fossil of ancient computation and Greek fire a fossil of ancient chemical engineering, Damascus Steel is a fossil of ancient material science. It shows that people once understood, in their muscles and scars and workshops, how to manipulate atomic scale structures without ever knowing what an atom was. It also shows how fragile that understanding can be. If your technique depends on a particular ore from a particular mine, and that mine is exhausted or its trade route is cut, your blades change. If your technique depends on apprentices willing to spend decades at the forge, and they are drawn away to other work, your tradition weakens. If your cities fall, your workshops burn, your guilds dissolve, and your ledgers rot, then the steel your grandchildren make will not be the steel you made. And a few centuries after that, people will look at your surviving swords in museums and say, how did they do this back then? 3 case files, 1 story. 3 case files then, a liquid fire that clung to the sea, a clockwork cosmos in a corroded box, a sword whose patterns reveal a microscopic architecture of strength and sharpness. Greek fire, the Antikythera Mechanism, and Damascus Steel all come from very different worlds. Byzantine warships, Hellenistic workshops, Islamic and South Asian forges. Yet they tell the same story. Human beings are capable of extraordinary leaps in specific directions. A small group, given enough time and enough focus, can push one branch of technology far beyond what their era should allow. They can invent superweapons, analog computers, nano-structured steels, long before those words exist. But these branches are not guaranteed to survive. They can be snapped off by war, by trade disruptions, by fashion, by forgetfulness. They can be guarded so jealously that when their guardians fall, the knowledge falls with them. They can be woven so tightly into a single culture that when that culture frays, the knowledge has nowhere else to live. We like to imagine that we are different now. We have textbooks, patents, cloud backups, digital repositories. We tell ourselves that nothing important can ever truly be lost again. But the past suggests otherwise. The past suggests that what is not actively practiced, taught, valued, and integrated into living systems will eventually rot away, no matter how clever it is. The past suggests that the real miracle is not that Greek
fire, the Antikythera Mechanism, and Damascus Steel existed, but that we ever found out they existed at all. So when you think about the technologies of your own time, the algorithms, the materials, the devices, the techniques, ask yourself, which of these will still be understood in 500 years? Which will be reduced to rumors and legends? Which will leave behind a single mysterious artifact dredged from the bottom of some future sea that will make distant descendants say, they shouldn't have been able to do this, not then, not with what we thought they had. Greek fire, the blade of Damascus, the gears of Antikythera. These are not just curiosities. They are mirrors. They show us that genius is common, but continuity is rare. They show us that brilliance appears, not as a steady glow, but as brief flares along the timeline. Flaring, fading, leaving after images we mistake for a smooth gradient. If you want more of these flares, more lost branches, more impossible inventions, more glimpses of futures that almost happened, then you know what to do. Like and subscribe so you don't miss the next case file. And in the comments, tell me this. Which of these 3 stays with you more? The fire that saved an empire, the machine that modeled the sky, or the blade that knew more about steel than its makers could ever explain? Till next time on the Scientific Profiles.